Sorry about that, guys. I think we got a little I think there was some issue with the network, so we got disconnected. So let's continue now. So as you can see, that's basically editing details in and textures in. Another thing that you can do is, yeah, we discussed raising or lowering terrain and smoothing height. So I won't go into that, but you can see that there's a lot more to terrains than we thought before, and you can even use materials. And I have a couple of trees in as well, which you can use uh, with the terrain. You can, yeah, you can always add in terrains, and you can make mountains. And yeah, we discussed all that before, so I'll not go into that again. So now let's come to the main topic for today's session. We'll be discussing our heads up display. So in the heads up display, I'll be discussing mainly the minimap and health bars. So let's start with that itself. So for the minimap, you will need a separate camera. So let's add in another camera, and we'll call it minimap camera. So for basically for our minimap camera, it has to have the same transform as the player because it has to be up right above the player. So give it the same x and z coordinates, but change the y coordinate to something like, let's say, 20. And then we have to make it point at the player. So change that to, let's say, 90. Let's add a cylinder or capsule for the player to make it easy to figure out where the player is. So yeah, as you can see, this looks very odd. So let's change the field of view. You can alternatively you can just change the height. So let's say that the height is something like 10, and let's set it back to 60, maybe 5. Yeah. So this is about going. This is going to be about fine. So now, as of right now, our minimap camera is trying to find out a target display, but is being overruled by the player camera itself. Again, we need the minimap camera to be present only in a particular section of our game, right? So how we do that is go to player UI and add a raw image. How this will work is I'll show you in a while. And immediately after you do that, go under create, go into your assets panel, click right click create, and then find something called render texture over here. Choose that and let's call it the minimap texture. So in your minimap camera, you can see that it has a target display, but it doesn't have a target texture because it tries to target the monitor itself. So let's change the target texture to minimap texture. And then all you need to do is take the minimap texture and go to raw image. There under texture, select minimap texture. And then let's see where our raw image is. Go to 2D, and I want the minimap to be in the bottom left corner of my game. So we'll go to minimap and then just I'll anchor it to the bottom right. Go 0, 0, and then just shift it enough. Leave a little bit space. So now when you play, you can see that the map is following you, but you can't see the grass on the minimap. And it depends on you. You might prefer it, you might not prefer it. To change that, it's going to be really simple. The X, which is at 90, just decrease the angle a little, make it something like 89. It won't affect anything in game. As you can see, the camera is well fixed. It's working very well, and you can see that this is actually about enough for you to see to get a good view of the game itself. And you can obviously change the size and whatnot by just changing the minimap size here. You can change the size to, let's say, 180 by 180. It should be about enough. Yeah, it might look a little too huge on this game, but once you build it, look just about right. So as you can see, the minimap is working well and it's following the player. So from our minimap camera, we do need to remove the audio listener. This is because our player camera already has an audio listener. If we have the audio listener on the minimap camera as well, that would mean that the same audio will be playing twice to our player. So that should cover enough of the basics. Make sure that everything you have is under player, even the event system, because it should be at the same hierarchy as the canvas basically. Under the canvas we have the minimap. So now let's create a minimap border. So just create a new image. You can again use raw image or anything. And again, let's use this. So now the border has to be just a little bit larger than our basic image. Let's take it out. So this is the hierarchy you'll need to follow. As you can see, there's a small white border. You can change the size of the outer image. But before that, do remember to move the hierarchy. So just select the image and let's make it about, let's say, 185 cross 185, and then yeah. So now you can see there's a small nice border. You can change the color and all obviously to whatever you find fit. So since this is a brownish kind of medium, yeah, that's about a good enough. So you can see a small border with the map, and this color gels in well with the rest of the map. Just rename it as mini map border. So when we talked about the shooting components, we didn't talk about the health component. Before we go into the scripting part of it, which is very simple, we'll first talk about how to create a health bar. So most games, whether an FPS or a role-playing game, any kind of game will usually have a health bar. Nowadays, even NFS has one. So for that, it's really simple. I'll just show you how to make a quick, small health bar, and you can do it. You can do the rest on your own. So for this, you need to add up two images. So one you can say is the health bar base, and the other image, call it, let's say, the health bar color. So the health bar base will be the one you parent the health bar color to. Before I forget, make sure that you anchor this back to the center, and minimap border should be anchored to the left bottom. So now what this anchor does is, as of right now, you can see the screen size is yeah, it's the screen size for the scene mode is really small, and even when we game on Unity, the screen size remains very small. So anchor automatically finds the screen size, whatever resolution you're following, and it anchors it on that base. By default, all images are going to be anchored towards the center of the map, towards the center of the canvas, basically. So as of right now, the canvas is covering a very small part, but the canvas is usually covering the whole resolution that you have. For that, while it might look fine in Unity, when you actually play it in the game, the minimap might actually look to be a lot more central than it's supposed to be if you haven't anchored it to the bottom. So anchoring is going to be very important here. Let's get back to the health bar now. So for the health bar base, basically how health bar works is you have a base health bar which is a grayish or a dark color, and you have a red health bar, and you just change the width of the colored health bar every time you take damage. Let me just do that and show you. So the health bar, let's keep the width a little lesser. Let's delete this for now. I'll add that in later. So let's change the width to something like, let's say maybe 200, and the height to 25. Yeah, that should be about fine. You can always change the health and change the size settings. It doesn't really matter much. We'll go with 300, and then anchor it to the center exactly. Position why I don't need to change it. So yeah, this I'll give the gray. This is the base, so I'll give it a grayish, darkish color. And yeah, for this you can change the alpha to a little smaller value, but I think this color should be sufficient enough. Then just create a duplicate of it. Let's rename that back to color, and then select a red color on top of that. Let's use a little bit darker. So now what you need to do is basically how this works is uh, to the can this anchor for the minimap border is related to the canvas. All these anchors are local based. So this will always come to the bottom left corner of wherever the canvas is. And the minimap should come in the center of its parent, which is the minimap border. Same way for the health bar base. Well, for this, I would definitely prefer to choose something like bottom center. You can go for middle center. I don't think it will make that much of a difference here. But for the health bar color, for the base, for the health bar color, make sure that you set it to left middle. I'll tell you why in a very short way. Basically, what you'll be doing is every time you lose health, you'll be calculating health as a fraction of the size of the width of the health bar color. So let's say that when you're at full health, the width is 300. When you lose health, let's say you lost 25 health, so this will decrease by a quarter, which is 75. So 225. What happens here is because it's should do. Why is this not open? Sorry, you do need to change the pivot also. So change the pivot to 0. Let's go back to 300. Yeah. So this is the base position, and change. Make sure you change the pivot to 0. When you decrease the width, you can see that it decreases like a health bar should. And this is basically what you'll be triggering through code. So when you're at 75% health, you can just change the width to 225. You can calculate that in script. So let's say let me open up a new script then. C# script. Let's name this health bar. uh, You can always, for taking damage, what you need to do is, okay, I'll cover that shortly. Never mind. Any doubts so far? Anything you want to recap, or anything you think I might have missed? Okay, so now in our script, first we need to refer the image itself. Okay, so we'll just refer to it as game object health bar. You can also refer to the rect transform here. As you can see that 2D objects have rect transforms and not transforms. It would be better to refer to it as a rect transform since we only need that component. And since this is stationary, we'll just, since this does not change, we'll just assign it in the editor. So we don't need a start menu. And we can have a public int health and set it as 100. I set it public for now because we will change it in the editor just to see how the image will look as per health changes. And under update, we just need to set health bar, sorry, dot width should be right here. Let's change the name to something else. Let's call it H bar. Should have a width component. Oh, size delta. Dot width. Just 1 second, guys. I have referred to it as a rect transform. Should pick up width directly. Oh, my bad. Yeah, it's just dot rect dot width, and we need to set it as. So we'll have. Okay, we will need a start function. Just call it. Yeah, we'll start, and we'll have another variable which will be a private variable, private int init health, which will be the initial health. So under start, we'll just have our init health. Oh, my bad. Init health equal to health because we need an initial health with respect to which we'll calculate the. And similarly, we can also have initial width. So initial, sorry, private int init width. Init width is equal to h bar dot rect dot width. So Oh, so yeah, this the width has to be float. So now what we need to do is we need to calculate what the width should be. So as you can, if by simple fractions, our width will be health by init health, and just multiply it into one point into 1f 1.0f, because we need to convert it from integer to float, and this is the best way to do so, into our init width. Just one second, guys. Alternatively, you could just change the size delta and updated size delta is equal to our whatever our height was. So h bar dot rect dot height is width first, right? Okay, we need a new vector 2. So say vector 2 size equal to new vector 2. Let's just rename this as size. So it's width first and height next. So right. So our width was our health into 1.0f divided by our init health into our init width, comma, our h bar dot rect dot width. So the reason we couldn't just change the width is because the width is only referred to as a constant and not a variable. So you always need to have a new vector created and change it there. Just remember to put these brackets in to avoid any confusion. So this should work. Let's see. And now we just need to attach this. So the rect transform that you're referring to is its own. So just drag and drop it. Oh, I've had set fusion. Okay, there's some issue here. Why is the height changing? Oh, new script compile and play. Yeah. So now, as you can see, if we change the height, if we change the health, the width of the health bar changes automatically. So in order to take damage, you can create, let's say, a new take damage function. Every time you update, this has to be there. So if you guys remember Rika shooting, we found the colliders which are attached to objects, right? So clearly when our player takes damage, we have a collider attached, which is the should be a collider here. Anyway, we can use the capsule that we use or whatever we are using to render the player. Change from 2D. Yeah, so we have the capsule collider under the player here. So we can refer to this capsule collider and we can find this, we can find the particular health bar script. So instead of using the health bar script here, attach the health bar script to the player itself and in that and remove it. Okay, yeah. And then in this, we have it already allotted. Whenever we try to find the player, we can just find this particular script in the raycast target and decrease the health by a fixed amount, whatever you want. That is how taking damage would work. So that's basically the two most important things that will be there present in every single game: health and a minimap. They're not necessary, but they definitely make the game look a lot better. Few other things that you might want to add. So now you can see that we have two basic parts of it sorted out. Another thing that you might want to add is a map compass. That requires a lot of work because you have to fix a direction on the map with respect to the player. And in most of the games, you'll see that the map doesn't actually look like the game itself. It's a very dialed down low graphic version. So that texture has to be developed separately and that can be correlated to the current position on the map. That's not going to be a big challenge. Excuse me. Yeah, so next we'll go on to, let's say, shooting scripts or, okay, we'll add text. So usually text in games comes either above the minimap or for here, for convenience now, I'll just put it up in the top right corner. Let's change the text size and yeah, so, and then let's anchor it to the top right and change the name to, let's say, information and remove all the text over here. Don't want any text to appear just before we enter anything. Again, you can change the alignment and everything over here. So I want it to be center aligned according to height, but left aligned according to the normal paragraph spacing. So how we can also refer to the text box. So let's create a reference to our text here. Public unity. Okay, so whenever we work with text, some you might find it updated in some versions, you might not find it updated in other versions. It's best to import unity engine.ui and then here you can refer to text as unity engine.ui dot text. So this is your entire text box. This entire thing is just going to be referred to as text and you can use the text over here as this dot text. Oh yeah, I forgot to give it a name. So let's call it, let's say, yeah, let's just call it information as well. Information box. So in most games, basically whenever you shoot a bullet or yeah, okay, so let's just keep shooting as a click. So if instead of click, let's make it to input dot get key down key, sorry, key code dot a. Sure. If we get if we press button A, then we are shooting. Get key down means keeping it down. Yeah, whenever we press it down at that particular point. So let's just increment our. Let's have an initial shot count, or let's just have an integer, public int count, and let's increase count by one here. And in start count is 0. So now whenever once you update this, let's say that every time you shoot, this is basically we'll just create a shoot function separately. So count plus equal to 1, and let's say whenever we increase whenever, and let's have a maximum count public int max count. Let's set that to something like or let's not set it, let's just update it in the inspector, and let's set max count equal to, or let's say that we want to print the number of remaining bullets, or maybe number of remaining quests, or depending on your game you could have anything. So basically max count has is going to be the maximum number of amount that you have. Like in bullets we talked about having 40 bullets or so, and in order to update the text, all you need to do is find just refer to the text box, information box dot text, and then you just need to set it here. You can also use plus equal to, it uses the already present text and then changes that. So let's say I'll just refer to it as bullets left, and then this the plus is going to be used for concatenation, and let's just say it's max count minus count. Okay, what kind of error is this? String and int. That should be that. So every time we shoot, basically every time we press A, this particular function will be triggered. Initially count is going to be 0. So let's go back to the player. Yeah, so now all we need to do is drag the information over here. It automatically checks it, and let's set the max count to, let's say, 10. The text is going to be updated here, and I'll change the color to white. You can see that the first time I pressed A, it becomes 9, and every time I press A, the text is changing here as well as here. Now this text can have anything and everything that you want. Uh, Basically, a lot of things that you will be using the text for would be, let's say, when you are making a role-playing game, it will be based on the quests that you are having, or the quests that you're tracking right now. For that, for quests, how basically it will work is you can have a dictionary of quests, and by dictionary I don't mean I mean the data type dictionary. In dictionaries are usually used in Python, so here you can maybe create maybe you can create a data type. So the quest data type will again have the rewards that you'll need, and the rewards that you need, the objectives of the quest, the rewards that you'll get, the objectives of the quest, and the location of the quest. Again, if you develop a low texture minimap and you have a map of the whole area, you can allot a particular area for the quest as a quest basic quest mark basically, and then you can uh, find the distance between your point, your player, and the quest, or you could find the direction between that and then render it onto the minimap. Doing that would require you to make a map of the whole terrain, so I'll not be covering that in this session. And one of the few things that you could do is a lot of times you would have seen that whenever you complete a particular quest objectives, the objective that you completed comes in and then it slowly disappears. So for that, what you can do is, let's say that I trigger that by something called So let's just call it something like text disappear. So let's have a new function called text disappear. So basically how the text disappearing happens is the size of the text is just decreased continuously till it reaches a particular threshold, at which point, yeah, it basically they change the text to nothing. So let's say that the text is just information. Let's say that I want to add a new line first, and then objective completed. So I don't want to use the same thing again, and this is something that I want to pop up in the center. So I'll use a different uh, text box. So as you can see, this particular part is gray here, which means that Unity engine.ui.text is not required. But in older versions of Unity, this was a necessity. So it's not a problem if you leave it there, and it's good practice if you'll ever be working on an older one. So let's call this objective box. Basically, if you will be working on an older version of Unity. Yeah, so now what you can do is you can refer to objective box, and you can see that, one second, let's create an objective box first. So UI text, and let's call this objective. We can go to 2D. Yeah, so this will come in the center. Again, I want to be center line on both. Let's increase the size just by a little. Let's change the color to something green, and it's initially set the text to nothing. So you can see that we have font size over here. So you can change that very easily. Not text, but size. Okay, font size. Yeah. So let's say that you want to change it. You can see that the initial size is 14 over here. Let's decrease it by a very small amount continuously, and then when it becomes, let's say, 10, we remove it, we put it to 0. Initially, let's have it to something like 20. When it reaches 10, we make it disappear. So for that, we need just a simple for loop. So size is supposed to be in integers. So make sure that you take care of that. Yeah, so you cannot have float values covering that. And once this for loop completes, again, now for this we'll need a time gap to see it, because this is happening, if it happens at the computation rate that the PC offers, then it will be extremely fast and we won't be able to see it. So you need to have a coroutine here. We have discussed coroutines earlier, so I don't think that should be a major problem. So instead of making this text disappear as a normal function, we'll have it as a coroutine. Let's change this to I enumerator. Yeah, so every time you decrease the size, let's say that we have a wait of about half a second. We'll return new wait for seconds. And let's say we wait for about zero point 0.5 seconds. Or let's just keep a wait time. Yeah, so once we have done enough, so once we have decreased the, now the font size is 10, we just make it disappear. So for that, just, yeah, this doesn't need to be plus equal to. And for that, just objective box dot text equal to nothing. So let the script compile, do it for that. We don't even need the slash in here, right? So this should basically trigger whenever we press E. So, oh, I forgot to assign the objective box. Objective. So it's still a little too, oh yeah, we forgot to put in a wait time. So let's say it's zero point 0.5 seconds. Yeah, you can see that as of right now, it's decreasing extremely slowly. Keeping a wait time of maybe something like zero point 0.2 would be better. Let's see how fast. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Now you can see that the text comes in two lines first. That happens because it cannot fit the text in the width. So you do need to increase the width a little. And instead of doing it from here, let's just increase the width. Let's say something like 250. Should be enough. You can see it disappearing. Make sure that whenever you enter this, everything else stops and this function is not triggered again, because if this particular if you press E while this is happening, then it'll end up doing the same thing twice and it'll stop working basically. So that's your basics of the HUD. The way we have done, the way we have made health bar move around, we could apply the same logic for let's say the number of bullets or reloading time, anything of that sort. And if you want to get real time into this, you can also say, let's say that the time for this, let's print the time for this to disappear. So time dot delta time. This give time dot delta time is used to give the real time that has passed from the beginning. Yeah, so this should be about enough. That will just print the number of seconds that are there that this function runs for. But that's from the starting of the frame. So if you want to set this to 0, you'll have to have a set function to change the time to 0. And basically, I don't think this is going to be extremely necessary for most of you here. Yeah, so this should not be a big problem. Anyway, if you want, you can see how this works. Yeah, you can see the time being printed there. And since the wait time is a little too less, you can't see it very clearly. Time is going to be more useful when you talk about reloading time or respawning time in games. For now, you can leave it. And yeah, if you have any doubts related to that, you can always ask me. What else? So that basically covers most of your heads up display. I don't think there's anything else that's required in the heads up display. So now I'll go on to covering sound effects. So one of you pointed out that the game sounds a little dull without sound effects. So adding sound effects is really easy. On the other hand, making them is going to be really tough. Basically, adding sound effects is extremely simple in Unity. All you need to do is go to audio, add an audio source, and here you need to enter an audio clip. I have some of these, I don't know. These are basically in the standard assets. I don't know what they're used for. Let's say I have something called flight wind. These are just a few effects that will be there. So I don't want it to play on awake, and I don't want it to loop. Basically, sound effects can be again be triggered through script. So let's say every time I press these if statements are actually just used for example. The if condition can be anything at all. Basically, it could be some complex game thing. Like let's say whenever you complete a quest, only then this object. Whenever you complete a particular part of a quest, then only then this object shows up or something like that. So for now, as an example, I'm just using simple key codes. You can always enter whatever you want in the if statement, and yeah, the function will run according to that. Dot get key down. Let's use okay. And now we want the sound clip to play. So let's make a different reference to the sound public audio source. Audio source, and let's call it noise. And in here, noise dot play. So this just plays it once and till it finishes. If you switch on loop, then it plays on a loop, obviously. That should be about it. The 3D sound settings, I don't think it's going to be very useful. Basically, these are used to see that the distance, what the distance between the listener and the object which is making the sound is, and how much sound should be there. So if you actually move the audio source away from the player, the sound you'll hear will continuously be diminishing. So, oh sorry, let's attach the audio source, and let's just pick audio source. You can hear the sound, right? So I think I used a jet propeller or flight wind or something like that, which is why the sound is like that. Alternatively, if you want to use, you can have the same audio source play different clips. You can change the audio clip in script basically. Like let's say you want it to change, you want to change it, change audio. Yeah, there are options to change the audio script as well. As you can see, there's a number of options which you can use for this. You can have it play one shot, play scheduled, basically play delayed, which adds a delay to the time, and you can check if it's playing. You can check if it's active. There's a number of things you can do basically, and these are all going to be very useful. You can change the clip basically. You can change the clip over here. For that, you need to again make a reference to the clip over here. Like you need to have a public audio clip over here. It's called audio clip, right? Yeah, audio clip. Call it. Let's call it audio clip itself, and then you can set this as audio clip, and then you can just set it to play. So even if it's not assigned a clip initially, you can change it. Again, you can have it play different sounds based on what you want. So that's pretty much it about sound effects. Sound effects are going to be really simple in Unity because you just need to change the clips. Although recording the sound clip is going to be a difficult task because you'll have to find either find the audio clip or you'll have to record it yourself. That's a very interesting thing is you can basically use any audio clip. You can insert a song here for all you care, and that's going to work perfectly fine on Unity. You just need to drag and drop the audio clip into the assets over here, and then that's it. That audio clip you can assign to any audio source over here, and then you can play it. That's not going to be a problem at all. So lastly for today, I'd like to cover up ProGrids. So when you're creating scenes, as of right now, we have not created anything too complicated. But let's say that you're creating something of a maze or a relatively complicated thing. So the use of ProGrids is yeah, as the name sounds, Unity's basic grids are not great. As you can see, you can, if you zoom out, you can barely see anything. Pro grids are basically an added feature to Unity, you could say. Unity is going to incorporate it in in I think by the end of the year. Anyway, whenever, let's say that you have a new object, let's create a prefab. Yeah. So you can see that, let's get it a little up. Yeah. So first off, it shows up and is definitely a lot better looking on the grids. You can see a few options here. The most important is this one. Sorry. The most important is, yeah, you can check whether you want to see it or not. Most important part is the toggle on or off. So what ProGrids does basically, yeah, so you can see that the object, when I'm moving it, it moves in fixed values. It doesn't move arbitrarily. So let's say that if I toggle the snapping off, then it moves and it's never properly aligned. And in most games, when you're constructing a complicated maze or maybe creating a new asset from scratch, it's definitely necessary to have a great grid and a great snapping function in place, because otherwise it becomes a real pain to align the objects again and again and again. For most open world games, it's not necessary, but it's definitely an added bonus. And another useful feature is, let's say that you already created a game, but not everything is in its place. So you can just click on snap objects to grid. Like, let's say, let me toggle it off and let's just put it in a random place. Then when I click toggle objects into grid, so it puts it into a particular steady amount. Now you can see that the grid size, snap size is already fixed and it's 1 unit. But let's say that I'm making a much larger game. So I want it to be a much larger value. So what you can do is go into edit, preferences, and then you have this whole progress panel where you can change the amount you can see. So increasing the alpha will change how much of it you can see. I'll just change it back to the default value. And you can see, you can change the colors of the grids. 10th line alpha means the alpha of the 10th line. You can see that not all of these lines are, sorry, let's put the preferences. Yeah, so you can see that not all of these lines are equally dark. Every 10th frame is a little darker, so that's the 10th line alpha. Grid units, meter, you can choose anything you want. Again, you have a lot of options here. You have snap on scale, snap all axes. You can snap on selected axis. Sometimes you don't want the height to be snapped automatically. These are all shortcuts which you can use. So basically, just by pressing equal to in the game, you can change the grid size. Just go to the y-axis. Yeah. So if you can see that when I press plus, sorry, when I press minus, you can change the grid size just by using minus and equal to. You can change the shortcut also here if you want. So nudge perspective is not going to be really useful for you. Similarly, cycle perspective, but the grid size is definitely going to be important. You can see a number of other preferences too. I would not mess with this because these are mostly going to be pre-built and pre-configured. Although, yeah, external tools is something that you can configure it. So a few of you had a problem with the Visual Studio installation. Basically, you can use which script editor you want to use and what should images open using and all that. But yeah, preferences is useful, but not that much. So yeah, I think that's basically what I will cover in today's session. Anything else you want me to cover today? One more thing, actually, I'll cover. Another thing that I want to cover is something called triggers. So that's the last topic I'll cover for today. If you want me to cover any other topic, please mention it in the chat. So what are triggers? Okay, let's capsule first, and let's. So whenever you have an object with a collider, the collider has an option called is trigger. So when the object, so when you keep this on and you just play, you can see that I can. Okay, sorry, I need to have the cube outside. Yeah. Now you can see that when the trigger is on, you can just walk through the cube. Even though the collider is on, you can walk through the cube. Right? Like right now, I'm standing in the middle of it, and I can walk through the cube. So, if what's the use of triggers? You might ask if you've been playing around with Unity a bit. So, what triggers are going to be used for is only script perspective. Let's add a script here to show you why, show you what exactly it is. So let's just call it trigger detect. Let's create a new script. Yeah, so again, we don't need either of these functions. So all colliders have an option called on trigger enter. Yeah, so basically what on trigger enter does is whenever an object enters the trigger over here, if you switch out the mesh renderer, you can see that the collider is active. This is basically what's used for you for detection when you're in a particular place or area. So let's say that you have a quest to reach a particular area, or I think that should be enough. Or more importantly, whenever you want to pick up weapons, or you want to pick up or you want to open chests or treasure chests or something like that, basically what you can do is change the collider size to whatever you want. And then basically what on trigger enter does is it detects whenever an object enters this, and you can see this parameter that's being passed, collider other. So this detects which collider has entered this particular trigger. So if I enter it with the player, it will show that the player collider has entered it. I'll just show it to you. So let's just say other debug dot log other dot name. Let's go to console. Okay, second. So okay. Okay, let me just put the mesh switch on the mesh renderer for now and go back to game mode. So as soon as I enter it, you can see that it shows capsule and player both. And every time I enter it, it shows the number increases by one over here. Basically, this is printing that capsule and player both have a particular collider and it has entered. Your character controller, I believe, is the collider for the player, and your capsule has another one as well. So while this is just printing the name, you could do a number of things with it. Like let's say this is a power up that you pick up while playing a game. So you can have something like other dot transform dot, let's say, scale. So what, let's say that it changes the scale to, it basically increases your size or something. So you can use just vector 3, let's say z, whatever the other dot transform, or instead of this just use y. Just change y, but y is equal to 2 f. Why is it not letting me do that? Yeah, so it has to be a vector 3. So new vector 3 other dot transform dot local scale dot x comma other dot transform dot local scale dot z. This should work. As you can see that I didn't need to mention the player or refer the player in any other way. It'll do this for any collider that enters the particular what do you call the cube over here. Let's switch on the mesh renderer. Now if I enter the player, my size if I enter the cube, my size increases. You can see that it yeah basically it increases. You can also have something like change it dynamically. So other dot transform dot y into 2. You can have a variable in fact referring here to the ratio of increase or whatever. Alternately, you could increase the amount of damage one does or pick up an object, something like that. As you can see that yeah, it's fallen through because the size was too much. Anyway, you can use this to change anything you want. So yeah, that about covers the session from my side. If there's anything you want me to cover, just mention it in the chat section. Otherwise, we'll close the session for today. So that's the session for today. We'll stop